Hi and welcome to another video from Costa Rica. At the moment I'm at Tortuguero. You can see the beach around me, and the travel to Tortuguero is kind of special. Tortuguero National Park is located at the Caribbean and the northeast of Costa Rica, and you can actually not travel here by car. So we needed to park the car, and then the last 1.5 hours was on a small boat going through the channels until we finally reached the small town or village of Tortuguero, with the National Park Tortuguero just starting at this point. If you know just a little bit of Spanish, you might know that Tortuga means turtle in Spanish, and the name Tortuguero is no coincidence. In the evening or in the night, you can have a lot of turtles coming to this beach, lay their eggs, and then going back to the sea. And of course, we did such a tour, it was amazing. But we also did a lot of photography with birds, reptiles, and so on. So in this video, I want to talk a bit about the turtles and also show you some images and some tips for bird photography. So as basically everywhere in the tropics around the world, day and night are approximately the same length, so around 12 hours. So sunset is a bit before 6 p.m. here, and then it gets dark very quickly. So we started with turtle tour around 7:30, I think. We went to the beach. We were a group of 8 people, and we were only allowed to have 3 flashlights to the beach, and then from the beach on, no more lights. So this means no flashlight, no camera, no smartphone, no smartwatches, nothing that emits light. From this point on, we basically needed to wait for a coordinator that discussed with the guide where the turtles are. And only when there was a turtle that was already kind of dug her hole and started laying eggs, we were allowed to get closer, and the guide was allowed to put a red light so we could see the turtle actually laying her eggs, which was an amazing process. The idea behind this is that the turtles, of course, need to be aware of predators. So when they come out of the sea and go to the beach, they are very careful. And if we are there too close, especially with our light, even if it's just a red light, they will just go back and wait and try somewhere else, and we will just disturb them, and maybe it will not lay its eggs. So we need to wait until it's really started laying eggs, because at this point they're basically unstoppable, and we could witness them, which was just amazing. So after the turtle laid its egg, it went back to the sea. We also saw another turtle coming out, but this was a bit intimidated of us. We tried to stay low, really keep a low profile, not make any noises or movements, of course no light. But still it apparently didn't feel very comfortable and went back. So we also decided to leave so that this turtle could also come afterwards. And if you might wonder if we're not bothering them too much, of course there is a minimum kind of impact that we have. But the good thing is that with every tour you book, there is a part of the money going for the conservation of the turtles, for the rangers that check the beach, make sure that they are not, that they can lay their eggs safely. Because also if there's rangers around, the risk of natural predators is of course lower. Of course, I also wanted to do some photography in Tortuguero. So since this was not possible with the turtles for obvious reasons, we decided to go for a boat tour the next morning, to go into the channels with a small electric boat. And we decided to go for a private tour for just the 2 of us, because this makes it easier for me as a photographer to tell the guide where I would like to stop and stay longer, how to position the boat. Because if you have been on boats with other tourists, you might know they want to quickly see the bird, maybe want to see the most colorful bird, even if it's high in the tree or in not good light. Whereas photographers, we often just want to get a good angle, good light, a good background, and so on. So this worked very well. We could really, with some subjects, spend 15-20 minutes just photographing one species. I was trying to get as low as possible. So luckily the boat was already quite low over the water level. But when I wanted to go even lower, I used my old technique of just taking the 600mm in one hand and holding it down, and then using the monitor, the articulated screen, to photograph. Of course, at this point, you kind of need to rely on eye autofocus because it's impossible to still move the point around with a joystick. And this worked very well, or quite well at least, and I was really happy at this point. I had my RF 600mm f4 and not my old EF 600mm f4 of the 2nd generation that I still had in Botswana last year, because after doing this for several minutes, you really feel your arm. In the morning we had quite clear skies and some nice morning light, but the problem is that this light can get harsh very quickly. You can see it on this picture. I think it's a green heron. It was still okayish, but was starting to get a bit hard. Luckily, the direction was basically perfect. Afterwards, luckily, some clouds moved in, so this was quite nice. And we also went into more smaller and closer channels, which were also more quieter, less tourists, and was quite a nice atmosphere. And we also saw quite some birds. After we entered one of the smaller channels, we saw an Amazon kingfisher, and I managed to take some quite nice shots of it, but you can see that the ISO were quite high at 16,000, and you might wonder, if the image stabilizer of the RF 600mm lens is so good, why did I use such a short shutter speed of 1/640 and thereby drive the ISO so high? Well, the problem is the image stabilizer is very good, but you need to keep in mind that the boat was moving. At this point we were more drifting, but still drifting with a bit of speed, and then it's very hard to keep the lens stable at 600mm. And there I just prefer to increase the ISO, have a bit more noise. I can usually clean this up very nicely with DxO Pure Raw, or you can also use Topaz products. I put some links in the video description if you want to test them out for free. You can see the final image still looks sharp with a lot of details, but the noise is basically gone. If the Kingfisher would have stayed at this position, I would eventually have dropped the shutter speed to maybe a 320 of a second or even 160 of a second, and thereby also reducing the ISO, but I first wanted to have a safe shot. One more thing I would recommend when you take pictures on a boat, or it can actually also be a safari vehicle, is that you don't start changing lenses, because on the boat dust is not so much of an issue, but you can have water coming in, the boat can make a sudden movement and you might break something, and you also lose a lot of time because it's more cumbersome to change lenses on a boat than on land. And I think the same applies basically for putting extenders in between. So of course here Nikon shooters have an advantage if you use the 400mm 2.8 or 600 f4 with the integrated extenders. For me as a Canon shooter, I don't have this option. So what I decided to do is just go without extender. Worst case, I crop a bit more or include a bit more of the environment. I usually prefer this than afterwards being like too close and clipping the wings of the birds or something like this. The boat tour lasted for about 3 hours. We managed without rain to come back. And afterwards I went a bit to the beach to look for some wildlife there. And there is some limicoles actually just 10 meters in front of me. I need to Google the name, but I think it's also sanderlings. But I want to make sure it's really the same species we have in Europe. They just look extremely cute when they look for some food here, and then they run back to the shore when there is a bigger wave coming. But the problem is I wanted to get low, get some nice shots. I used a short shutter speed, and eventually a wave hit me, so I got a bit wet. The camera was totally fine. I kind of lifted it a bit over the ground for the shots anyway, because ground level was almost a bit too low because the sand is not completely flat. There is some hills, and then if you shoot ground level, it can be that you have some sand in front of the bird. So I tried to lift it like maybe 2 inches, 5 centimeters above the ground. What I preferably use here is my skimmer ground pot, but due to the weight restrictions of the plane and all the other equipment I already have with me, I left this in Switzerland. What I would highly recommend though is kind of a rain cover. I use the cam shield from Tragoban. I'm quite happy with it, and it's not only against rain, it's more that maybe there might be a splash, some splashes of water, some drops, and this is salt water. So this is more of a problem to the lens, and even worse in my opinion is sand that might get into the lens or camera. So I would try to protect the lens here as well as possible. At the moment the weather is dry but overcast, which is almost perfect conditions for going for some bird shots, exploring the area. I will do this a bit later, go along the beach and hopefully see some more birds. We saw some toucans before, so I hope I can show you a few more videos and photos. And most likely this is the last video of this series from Costa Rica. I was thinking of doing maybe one additional one where I don't talk at all. You will not even see my face. It would just be videos and pictures with some music from birds, mammals, reptiles, butterflies, landscapes, everything from Costa Rica, a bit more nature feeling, like maybe 15-20 minutes, as I mentioned, with some music. Let me know if this sounds interesting to you, and see you in the next video.